Okay, so our first speaker I'd like to invite to the floor is Charlie Foster. So Charlie is a professor of physical activity and public health in the School for Policy Studies at the University of Bristol. Charlie is a recognised global leader in systematic reviews and meta-analysis of the evidence base of physical activity and has produced reviews on epidemiology, correlates, interventions and evaluation of natural experiments. Charlie's published nearly 200 papers across a range of high-ranking medical and public health journals, including The Lancet and the BMG. And he has authored global guidelines and contributed to policy and advocacy, working with international organizations such as the World Health Organization and the CDC in the USA. Since 2015, Charlie has been the chair of the UK Medical Officers Expert Committee for Physical Activity and has provided expert advice on exercise and physical activity to the Chief Medical Officer, to the Department for Health and Social Care, and to the UK Government. He's led work and produced the final report for the UK Chief Medical Officer's 2019 Physical Activity Guidelines. And in 2019, all his work was recognised by being awarded an OBE in the Queen's New Year's Honours List for his contribution to physical activity promotion. And more recently, he's been busy advising on COVID-19 and physical activity for the Chief Medical Officer. So Charlie, thanks for joining us today. We look forward to your presentation titled, Why Should We Make Strength Stronger? Hand over to you.
Thanks, Paul. It's very kind. Firstly, just everyone wave if you can hear me. Hey, that's brilliant. Excellent. I've got a bit of energy. This is wonderful change. Normally, when I give lectures to students, I have a sea of blank screens with just names in it. So it's really lovely to see some faces here today. So thank you so much for keeping your cameras on. Thank you very much, Paul and Gary, and to Jane for setting today up, and but more importantly, for all of you for giving your time to come and listen to what is a really important area about maintaining the population, keeping them active. We're all in this business together, and there's huge amounts of expertise on this call, and it's not going to all come from me. I can guarantee that. There's a lot of very good people here. I'd also mention I'm now sharing with Karen Lloyd. I can see on the call the kind of co-directorship of the Apple HIT. So I'm getting she's training me up to kind of learn about Bristol and about those sorts of things. So I'm looking forward to engaging in that area as well. But I'm going to talk briefly today about kind of strength, which is a sort of strange choice of topic. And hopefully you'll see some slides. Let me just move some bits around. There we go. You'll see some slides that says, why should we make strength stronger? Excellent. Paul will interrupt me if something goes wrong. Well, it's important, first of all, to understand that we have in all physical activity guidelines, so we've got the CMO ones here, available for download, free from u.gov website, probably next to the John Lewis ads. If you just look, no doubt you'll find them on there. What we have is a really important reason for why strength matters, and it's kind of a forgotten guideline. And I want that really to be one of the takeaway points from today, is we talk a lot about physical activity, we talk a lot about the health benefits, but they tend to be related to the heart rather than your muscles. And we've got to remember that those are probably more important right now, post the lockdown. Need to declare some interests. I do take money from everybody in there who doesn't have a cross on them, but I don't take money from fast food, pharmaceutical industry, or the soft beverage industry. So let's start with a bit of a quiz. And the first bullet point there, 56% of women and 66% of men achieved the kind of aerobic physical activity guidelines, and then some of them are behind me on the wall. 150 minutes of moderate activity or 60 minutes of vigorous activity. But what proportion achieved both the aerobic and the muscle strengthening recommendation? Is it higher or lower than the proportion put there? And you're all going to have a little guess, and some of you will guess low, some will guess high. Give yourself a pat on the back if you got anywhere close to these numbers. So what we know is when we add in strength recommendation to the aerobic one, which is 2 sessions of some type of strength training every week, we see the proportion to achieve this goal fall. So why should we make strength stronger? Well, first of all, strength's been around for a very long time as a kind of a behavior to do in order to maintain healthy. What you see there is a picture of a ding. Dings were used in ancient Chinese culture. We're talking 5,000 years BC plus, in order to demonstrate that your army was particularly strong. And this one is a double ding, so two people would be asked to lift this particularly heavy thing. Strength has been around for a very long time. I want to talk a bit about why it matters, a little bit about the experience that we had in our unit and also with colleagues across the country, supporting some resources during lockdown and COVID. And then finally, and it's my take on what I think the impacts will be. And probably no surprises to any of you. So let's go back in time, and some of you may recognize this particular 1970s. I'm sure Paul looked wonderful in Lycra in the 1980s. Guidelines have been around for a long time. We've had them since the mid-70s, and included in how to be active, if you went to a gym in this time, people would give you a prescription that would include two elements of muscular output. One is strength, how strong you are, how much you can lift. And secondly, how long can your muscles last in terms of endurance? And they kind of disappeared for about 20 years as the aerobic one took over. And what we've had is what we call these physical activity guidelines, the UK ones. And what they are, they're kind of epidemiological thresholds. What does that mean, Charlie? What it means is they're lines in a sand that we're trying to get people over in order to get some kind of health benefit by achieving that particular level. And there's our definition there. Kind of optimal behavior is associated by achieving this threshold. So of course, having a threshold means you're either above or below it, and that's not a great thing. So one of the good news about the new guidelines is they try, instead of ignoring all the activity below the line in the sand, imagine a long jump pit and you're trying to jump over a particular line, we now include the activity that lies below that threshold as important. All activity matters, one of the strap lines for here, and nice to see the WHO picking up that, that title in their new recent physical activity guidelines as well. Why do we do it this way? Well, it's to do with the dose response curve. So sorry to get a bit technical for a few moments, but what we see here is we have risk on the left-hand axis here, high risk and low risk. And as we go across becoming more active, we move from low active to high active. And what we see, of course, is the more active you are, the lower your risk. But the good news about the dose response curve, of course, is when we draw our physical activity guideline, we make this sort of line in the sand here. But if you look at the shape of the curve, the really good news is you can get more of a benefit from starting to become active at this end of the curve than you can from increasing from some activity to even more to achieve the threshold. Now, these types of recommendations ignore strength. Strength is a categorical one. We need to do as much of it as possible. And of course, the activities you do aerobically, like Nordic walking, like cycling, like swimming, would all also contribute to your strength. So sometimes you can double count, which is okay. But if you were interested, there's more technical information in the guidelines. Why does strength matter? So what we see is, as we get older, and we've got age on the bottom here and strength and balance here, because that, of course, the two things are almost interchangeable. As we see age increasing, what we see is if you've maintained a stronger trajectory, the green line, throughout your life, by the time you become older, that difference in the strength that you have will keep you better, fitter, and weller, and more able to act independently. And we're trying to prevent this kind of gap between the stronger and the least strong occurring particularly at early and middle age in terms of life. So those kind of aches and pains, and I'm well into that decade now where that's a real thing. The fact of life is, you know, those aches and pains can improve and get better the stronger you are. So what we need to do, of course, is try and build strength in across the whole of the life course, the whole of people's age, because these other issues that happen in life also, we know, are significant times when strength changes or strength change behavior stops happening. Okay. So if we look at the proportion of people who achieve guidelines, we see an age-related response. What does that mean? It means younger people do more strength-related stuff than older adults, probably because it's involved in sports, probably because they do more activity that tends to be more vigorous, so it tends to demand more power. If we break down at the older end of
sorry, Charlie. Sorry to interrupt. I think the slides haven't moved on.
Slides got stuck. Has it? Where am I stuck, Paul?
You're stuck on the dose response curve. We've got the blue line. We couldn't see the green line.
Ah, you're on Dawn's, are you? How's that? Is that better?
No, but how about, would you like me to
yes,
share
please.
and you just talk me through? Okay.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Yeah, we had anticipated this might happen. It's my dodgy internet.
If you stop sharing and
sure, no problem at all. Thanks, Paul.
Just do a quick swap over. Just give me 2 seconds.
I won't start at the beginning. That'd be terrible. Excellent. If you have any questions, by the way, I know Gary's desperate for you to start typing them in the chat box. He's nodding away there. Cheers. Thanks, Paul. That's great.
Where'd you get up to?
One more. That's perfect. Yeah, okay. So if we look at the right-hand side of the graph, we've got this older age group broken down, and even amongst older age groups, by these sort of five-year groupings here, we can see a dose response by age in terms of strength participation. But the really good news is it doesn't matter how old you are, you can become stronger. So we've got trials of 85, 90-year-olds who are doing strength training activity and increasing their strength by 20 or 30% relatively quickly. So that's good news. Your body's amazing, so we need to keep using it. Next slide, please, Paul. Okay, so we've done a review as part of the CMO guidelines to inform what we know about strength. And this is really the summary. What we have here is we know that strength and balance activities at any age will improve your function and maintain your health and reduce your all-cause mortality. There's specific times in your life where things get in the way and stop you keeping your strength: pregnancy, menopause, retirement, etc. Sometimes these can help go in the opposite direction. People take up activities, but usually we see activity levels falling. We know that there are different activities and exercises are needed for at-risk populations. So these sort of public health guidelines aren't necessarily what you would be offered by a medical practitioner in relation to a particular condition. But these are kind of general population guidelines we're after. And of course, for elderly and frail elderly, that we know that strength training as part of a supervised program can be incredibly helpful, and obviously helps people regain their confidence, ability to balance, and obviously strength as well. Next slide, please, Paul. All right, so it's a bit of a spot the ball competition now, for those who are older to remember what that is. But what we have here is we have all our recommendations from 1 years old up to 80 plus in terms of our physical activity recommendations from the CMO guidelines. And these infographics are also available and downloaded from the CMO website, or you can go onto the University of Bristol website and you can get them for free there. And what you'll see is, keep going, Paul, is every single guideline includes strength, but the most important one is for adults, is we've switched the order and emphasis from the 150 minutes from the old pregnancy guideline on the wall behind me to putting strength in the middle here, because we know that this is something that's been very forgotten, particularly amongst professional groups who work with older adults around strength, around physical activity. So we popped it in the center here, completely going against pretty much every other country, but we thought, why not? Let's be different. It's important. Thanks, Paul. Next slide. Okay, and here's a summary of the activities, because people often say, so yeah, we've got to do two times of what a week? So what we have here is a graph, as a figure from the guidelines that sort of gives you a sense of the rating of the different types of activities and their impacts on muscle function, your strength, bone function, because bone health matters, and also balance as well. Now, Some of these are quite controversial, and the eagle-eyed amongst you might notice that walking doesn't appear to do terribly well compared, let's say, to Nordic walking for strength training. And it's about overload and progression. This data is based on the trials that have been done and doesn't necessarily mean if your favorite activity isn't in there, there just hasn't been a trial of it, but obviously it could help with strength training. Okay, next one, Paul. Okay, next slide, please, thank you. So let's look at our check and send service. So when the COVID lockdown started, it was very clear that people needed to have resource available to support them being active either at home or during the lockdown period. And it became very evident that some of the national sports and public health agencies were producing resources very quickly. And the CMOs wanted us to make sure that what they were saying was correct. So a few groups of academics across the country, in the end we had 45 from nearly most universities in the country, we offered what we called the check and send service, formerly called a rapid expert review, but it was really a chance for people to share their resources they were producing with us, and just to make sure there was nothing in there that was in sort of scientific parlance a bit dodgy. Because there were a lot of claims being made about the benefits of physical activity in relation to COVID, and some of them just weren't evidence-based. So that's what we did. Next slide. And what do we find? What we found is actually it's a really important thing to do. There were a lot of online materials, particularly of groups of videos that were being produced, or blocks of videos that were being lumped together and said, this is a really good activity for a starting person who's not very active. And actually, you had to be pretty much superhuman to get through the workout. It was impossible. So there was a lot of information there. It was generally poorly labeled. It wasn't set up or clear about who it was for. The provision of resources weren't sort of centrally controlled. Anybody could post anything. We felt that NHS Digital should have a much stronger voice and lead in this. And it'd be interesting to see what Age UK make of it, because actually I think it's a really good opportunity to kind of badge and kite mark good quality output for people. We needed print materials as well. There was a huge rush to put everything on a digital platform, but that wasn't necessarily the most helpful platform to have. And finally, there were some very good resources. I know you're going to hear about one in a moment from Jane, no doubt, that was available as well, and also including the print versions of those two as also. Okay, next slide, please, Paul. Thank you. Next one. So how's lockdown going to help or not in terms of strength? So what we've seen during the lockdown is we've seen that usual healthcare services demand has dropped, particularly for physical and mental health conditions. There's substantial reductions in primary care contacts. So what we know is, and some of you I'm sure will be very aware of it from your work and from your own personal experience, that chronic conditions remain unscreened and untreated, and there's a bulge, and that bulge is going to come, and it's going to be quite overwhelming. So we're going to have to get ready for it. Next slide, please, Paul. So some people have tried to gather together all the studies that have been performed during any kind of period of COVID lockdown. It's a very nice review by Stockwell. There's a reference there for you. These are the UK studies, and no studies have reported anything to do with changes in strength-related behaviour. They're all focused entirely on aerobic behaviour or physical activity. Even the Active Life survey, which came out today, the latest data, doesn't analyse the data in terms of muscle strength and balance activities, when it could do, but it doesn't do it. So we don't know where we're up to, but we suspect, next slide, that these will be what the impacts will be. So there'll be a group of people who are post-COVID. So they've been post-hospital treatment and been discharged. They will need help with strength and balance recovery. There'll be people in care homes who may have had COVID, may not, who've had reduced movement. They'll also need more help. And obviously the home-based cohort who were locked down too will also need more help. So it's three very important groups there that shouldn't get overlooked. Generally across the population, there's been less physical activity overall, particularly nuanced by ethnicity and social inequalities. There's been more sedentary behaviour. The online screening services for TV substance have gone up massively, just as another indication. Less everyday activity because we weren't going out, and we certainly weren't going to and from work or shops, etc. There was definitely less strengthening exercises because you couldn't go to a gym and people were unconfident about how to do things at home. Interestingly, Amazon sold out of home-based fitness equipment almost in the first week of lockdown. So there's an indication that people were trying to do things at home who could afford to. And people will emerge with a lower capacity and lower starting points. So we've had that period of detraining. Whatever we start from will be less fit and less ready to go. So we all, and I think you'll all agree, need to help people rehab, recover, start and restart in terms of their activity levels. Nearly last slide, Paul. So here we are. This is the challenge pile. This is what I leave you with. We will have across the nation, a considerable group who are sarcopenic. Their muscle mass would have been disappearing, and they would have had a detraining effect anyway, because they've just not been able to be cardiovascularly active as well as strong. There'll be clearly impacts on mental and physical health here, and the inequalities that we saw before lockdown have become exacerbated and worse. And that, for me personally, is the thing I think we need to really work on hardest. Excellent. I think I'm done, Paul. One more. Yep, that's me. That's me. But if you've got any questions, please put them in the chat and I'll hand back to you, Paul. Thanks for picking up the technical issue.
Wonderful. Thanks, Charlie. I have to clarify, I've never worn Lycra, but I have started recently wearing running tights, so it's probably a slippery slope. Thank you. I mean, so many important messages there for us to think about, and we'll come back to some of those ideas and messages that you've raised in the question and answer session. Okay, so let's turn to our second expert and guest speaker today. So I'd like to welcome Jane McDermott. Jane is a Policy Research Unit Manager and works within the NIHR-funded Older People and Frailty Policy Research Unit, based at the University of Manchester. And this unit's an important collaboration led by the University of Manchester with Newcastle University and the London School of Economics. And it's one of 15 national policy research units whose purpose is to advise the Department of Health and Social Care, answering questions on the lives of older people to inform government policy. So for the last 9 years, Jane has been working across Europe as a member of the European Innovation Partnership on Active and Healthy Aging, particularly within an action group that focuses on falls prevention. And Jane's also been the program lead for the European Commission-funded Prevention of Falls Network for dissemination. Jane's a founder member and key operational lead for the European Falls Festival and contributing member of the Greater Manchester Active and Healthy Aging group. Jane is a practicing leadership coach, working with senior figures from across charitable, public and third-party organisations supporting transformational change. And when she's not doing all this amazing work, Jane is a keen fell walker, wild swimmer, cyclist and cook. So Jane, thank you for joining us from Manchester. I'm just going to bring up your slides.
Hi everyone, and thank you for inviting me. It's great to be here and such a great turnout as well, such a vast range of people. So thank you. I'm really delighted to have the opportunity to speak today alongside Charlie, but thank you, Paul, for inviting me. I'm going to really focus on a piece of work very specific today, and Paul's very kindly agreed to share my slide deck because I'm on an iPad and things don't always work the way you want them to. Thank you. So as I've been introduced, Jane McDermott, I'm a member of I'm here actually representing the Healthy Aging Research Group. We're based at the University of Manchester. We're a large team of, I think, more than 30 multidisciplinary researchers, scientists, professors, based in the School of Health Sciences. And you'll see there, I've mentioned a couple of colleagues on these slides because actually these are colleagues that actually are working in the field of physical activity and healthy aging. And so that this is maybe the work as well that I kind of build this case study on, but also we'll talk about a little bit later. So thanks to them, and we're all part of the big team and my contacts there. So I've just, my primary role is actually to manage the policy research unit as Paul's just outlined. So if you want to go to the next slide, please, Paul. I'll then give you a little bit of an overview. The Healthy Aging Research Group's got a large area of expertise. Falls prevention is very much our bread and butter. as is physical activity and exercise promotion, very much around strength and balance. We do focus in mid to later life interventions. And so a lot of our work is very much around the stuff that Charlie's just touched on about how we progress through later life, certainly looking at falls, strength and balance as a preventative measure to reduce falls risk, but also then if somebody has had a fall, then we're looking at the falls management exercise program, which is an evidence-based program that was originally, the trial was originally done at Manchester by Dawn Skelton, who is a legend in the field of falls prevention, if anyone doesn't know the brilliant Dawn at GCU. And so the trial was done here. So this is part of our work and something that we've continued to work on over the many years. We also do work on nutrition, hydration, rehabilitation, looking at a lot around M-health, E-health technologies, fundamentals on health behaviour change and health literacy as well. And a lot of our work is similar to how Charlie described the research units here at Bristol, which is around developing testing interventions to promote active and healthy ageing, also to assist older people to maintain independence, to promote good quality of life so that people can continue to take an active participation role in society. And we promote equity, especially in terms of investigating some of the determinants, the wider determinants around our access to services, treatment, all the things that relate to us as we age throughout the life course. We've also mentioned that I am part of the policy research unit for older people and frailty, but also we work with the Applied Research Collaboration, Greater Manchester. And if anyone doesn't know Greater Manchester, we're a 10 local authority, regional, city region, a connected city, which is where our university finds itself. It's in the centre at Manchester. In all our work, we're absolutely very committed to working with older adults. They are especially in the design of all the technologies that we produce as part of our innovation platforms, but also they are a fundamental part of all the research that we do throughout the whole of the research team and across the university more widely. But today, I'm actually going to talk to you about a case study. So this is about Greater Manchester's response to the COVID-19 crisis, which has happened over the past 12 years, and specifically highlighting something called the Keeping Well campaign, which we've run. It's run for 12 months now. And I'm just going to take you through the narrative and journey of that story, of what happened to us over the past year, and what we've learned as part of the process. I'm also going to touch on some innovation work that we're doing around technologies and falls prevention, strength and balance specifically. And then I'm just going to touch on some of the related policy research unit rapid response pieces that we've done. Again, it's all on our website. Everything throughout my presentation, which I've given to Paul as a PDF, has got hyperlinks in it. So when you all get copies, you can just hyperlink your way through it. Hopefully that should just take you to all the different sites. So it makes it really easy to navigate. But do get in touch if you can't get hold of anything or if you want any further information on anything I'm going to cover. Thanks, Paul. So I'm just going to get us all to just remember about a year, well, 13 months ago now, when, a national crisis, we're at the very beginning of COVID. The 23rd of March it was, the Prime Minister Boris is there making that address to the nation. And if we just kind of remember how that time felt, I know that we were all, my family, we couldn't believe it. It was the first time in my life anything like this had happened. Of course, my parents have been through wars, and so they've experienced this kind of thing before. But, it was a really surprising time, lockdown. Everybody was to stay at home, protect the NHS, save lives. There was a real time, actually, because anybody during that week, you'll remember, if you had actually a week before had been told, if you were over the age of 70, or if you were classed as clinically vulnerable, which is the language of health, then lockdown had actually begun a week earlier for you. Prior to that, these groups you've been told to shield, you've been told to self-isolate, and this was about reducing your risk of COVID infection. So this actually meant that many older people who were previously going out, attending activity classes, strength and balance programs, or in fact, any type of group activity, were immediately stopped from doing that, as we all were as a nation. But other people that had been volunteering and doing a range of things that are all part of keeping our purpose and good quality life as we age, were all stopped immediately. This also meant that a lot of people were then at home. Many of them were alone. Also, some of them without any outdoor space or gardens or any of those lovely luxuries that many of us have actually grown to really appreciate in the last 12 months. So in response to this, the Greater Manchester Ageing Hub, which is based in the Greater Manchester Combined Authority, started to pull together a weekly meeting of key ageing leads from across the Greater Manchester ecosystem. This was primarily aimed at really trying to ensure that we were listening, learning, trying to understand from the system what older people were thinking, what they were feeling, what the shielding felt like, and what was going on at general level. Thank you, Paul. So just to give you a little bit of an overview on the next slide, this is the ageing players that sat around this Keeping Well campaign. And you can see there's a real smorgasbord there of lots of different partners. So it's everybody from our Ageing Hub, the ageing leads across the 10 local authorities. It was the Healthy Ageing Research Group, which was me, our team. It was the Health and Social Care Partnership, Nutrition Hydration, Greater Sport, Age UK, all the VCSs, Ambition for Ageing, the newly formed community hubs, which was the rapid response point to try and ensure people had somewhere to go or contact. They were represented in a range of mutual aid groups as well, and many others from across the system, including, most importantly, the Greater Manchester Older People's Network, which is a network of older adults, anyone aged over the age of 50 can join, who constantly contribute to all our work and thinking across all of the combined authority, working in local authorities as well, but also within our research at the university. So we came together once a week to share insights, stories, things that we were hearing, listening to, understanding, some anecdotal, some were, actually things that we were hearing more than one time. Messages were clear that people were really confused about the government guidelines. Can I do this? Can I not do that? They felt unsure about what they couldn't do, felt anxious, alone, a little bit worried, a lot of worry and anxiety, missing appointments, not wanting to worry the NHS with making healthcare appointments, not wanting to contact the GP. There was a huge move to digital by default, which Charlie touched on before. As well as that meeting that we was attending, I was also part of a national meeting where Charlie was also in, which was the National Falls Prevention Coordination Group. And again, here we were listening that there was real concerns about people falling. What are we going to do? How are we going to respond to that? And so we started to pull people together and we started to think in Greater Manchester, we need to do something here and we need to do something at pace. There's lots of information online, some stuff coming through the television, but everything was digital by default. We knew in Greater Manchester that we have more than 200,000 people that are digitally excluded. Of that 200,000, 150,000 are people aged over the age of 65. So we knew that we needed a paper-based resource. But, we also knew that in Greater Manchester, we are an age-friendly city region. We have a really long tradition of inclusive practice when it comes to ageing, 20 years or more of working. And so we wanted to make sure that we were listening to the voices of older people where best we could. So we decided to pull together all the evidence that we had from the Healthy Ageing Research Group, the work from the CMO as well, but also not just falls, strength and balance, nutrition, hydration as well, mental health and well-being, and how people can try and remain well whilst they were at home, as well as some other things that we thought were really important. We did call on Charlie's rapid review check sense call, which was fantastic. Got him to check what we were saying was evidence-based, was aligned with CMO guidelines, we'd got it right. And so with that, we decided this is it. We've got a great office of the system, let's do it. So, next slide, thank you, Paul. We produced the Keeping Well at Home booklet. So Keeping Well at Home, older people were fundamental to it. They contributed to all of it. And one of the things that they really felt strongly about with all the groups we talked to when we were pulling this together, literally in weeks, was that actually we needed to change that narrative. We needed to stop using the word vulnerable. We need to start using the word valuable. We need to start to think about what people can still do during national lockdown, how we can still contribute, how you can still volunteer. Things like, watching a lot of the news was not necessarily the best thing to look after our mental health because it's quite anxiety inducing, but also how could I volunteer in terms of the NHS and actually becoming a a befriender, a telephone befriender. So there was a number of different ways that people could actually start to volunteer. But older people told us that we don't want negative messaging. We want somebody to feel empowered and things that they can do during lockdown rather than what you can't do. So we filled the booklet with a range of different pieces of information. As I've said, it was all evidence-based, looking after our minds, mental health, staying connected with others, keeping well nourished, information on how to get up for the floor as well. And then, as I said, a few good case studies from older people. We produced 2 versions. We did a local one and we did a national one. The national one was actually aimed at letting other people just adapt it and change the contact numbers, because on the back it had all the community hub numbers, so anybody could change their numbers. So if we can jump to the next slide, Paul. What you can see now is essentially a really successful story. So by August, September, this is a kind of story, a spotlight was, we'd done 66,000 copies. They'd gone across Greater Manchester and been delivered in a range of different distribution pathways, from community hubs through to food parcels, through to post. 12,000 digital downloads from the original copy. We also, the adapted version was adapted with 9 different, or 10 now, different local authorities from Scotland, in Northern Ireland, and also throughout the south as well. There was 80,000 further printed copies that had been sent out. And so it was generally a huge success. We were even featured by, we were actually approached by the World Health Organization, who said this is an exemplar of best practice in terms of an age-friendly resource during the time of COVID and national lockdown. So what a great success. But we didn't sit back. We sat there and thought, right, we've done it. We've done it. We've achieved something brilliant. We can sit and you go, we've done it. It's over. But actually, it was summer. We started to ask ourselves, you know, has it worked? Did it really make a difference? Did actually that whole idea about people needed printed materials, was that relevant to people? Did older people even do any of the exercises? Did they even read the booklet, or did they just throw it in the bin? What happened? So this is when we started to decide, well, actually, we need to do a good evaluation on this. So we, again, with older people working with us, developed a little evaluation, because what we wanted to understand was whether it had worked, and had it been successful, or hadn't it been successful, and get a little bit of a picture of what had happened. So in the summer, just after it was actually August, September time, when I found myself stuffing envelopes, along with paying my children to stuff envelopes, and we were all doing it, thousands went out across Greater Manchester. We did a 2-stage evaluation where we did a postal survey sent out to all those that we know had received copies, and also a digital survey on with the stakeholder groups who had been involved in the process. We had nearly 1,000 responses. And so then what we did is we had to start to look at that data to give us some insight in terms of what did older people tell us, and whether what we'd done was the right thing or not. So the next slide. What did they tell us? Well, only 6% of respondents said they preferred online versions of any of the materials and resources that were featured in the booklet. Of those who actually did have access to the internet, only 83% of them still reported that they preferred to receive paper-based information. 65% agreed that they would not have had access to this information if they hadn't received the booklet. 90% of respondents said the booklet would help older people stay healthy and active during lockdown, and 74% of respondents said they had used the home exercise. 78% of respondents also found that the tips on keeping our mind helpful. Just to say, actually, I didn't say that. We sent out 5,000 postal copies, and we had about a 10% response rate. So we didn't send it out to 66,000 people because we didn't have the raw resource. And I think I'd have gone crazy walking around my own kitchen table stuffing envelopes over summer to that extent. So we sent out 5,000 in total, and we had about a 10 to 12% response rate. Other things that people did tell us is actually about digital exclusion. So 50% of responses had no access to the internet. Access was lowest in the older age group, so people aged 80 and above. Reasons for not having access were actually about, I don't have a computer, I don't have access to Wi-Fi, I'm actually just not interested in digital tools or digital media, And actually, the other one was around skills, which is I just don't know how to use it, so I wouldn't know where to look. And again, this kind of reflects some of the stuff that the Good Things Foundation are looking at and have found, is that very much there are digital skills, infrastructure are really important parts of how we engage people and start to reduce that digital poverty that exists across the UK. The next slide. So based on what we'd found out, we then did a series of recommendations for policy and practice. So ensuring public communications are absolutely critical. Reaching out to those not connected needs to be considered for all public communications, including target group representatives as co-editors, to advise both on the content, the stylistic design, was absolutely key, we believe, to the success and how much people really appreciated getting the messages. We had things like, because people had the opportunity, people just saying it was really nice that somebody was thinking about me when they received the booklet. Some really heartfelt messages as well from a range of different people. So we know that it was actually successful in lots of different ways. So there's a link there to the evaluation report if you want to look further and in more depth at some of the data that we actually received. And this really is just a bit of a snapshot. So I'm now going to kind of jump us forward. We were kind of in autumn time, furthermore restrictions. And actually, I mean, in Greater Manchester, many of you will know, you might have seen our mayor on the news several times. We've only been out of restrictions or some sort of tiered system for 3 weeks last July. So we are only just now coming out of it, but even that 3 weeks was a very small period of time when we were allowed out. We were actually locked down again in some form during the tiers, the introduction of tiers from very early, late July, early August. But we were starting to think about winter. There were other things that we were starting to listen to. And actually we realised that winter planning was really important. We also had asked quite a lot of further questions in the evaluation about what was missing in the booklet. What else did people want to know? And so as a result of that, we decided to produce another version. What was lucky is the first version, which was done on a shoestring and as kind of a pivot and a real kind of beg, steal and borrow from whoever we could to kind of create and do what we could. Because we now had this version, we had an evaluation, we had a World Health Organization case study, that we found that the funding for the second version was more open, and actually people were much more willing to give us some funding, certainly from some of the partnerships across Greater Manchester, which was really fantastic for us. So we just go to slide 9. Keeping Well This Winter is the new campaign. Well, it's kind of was just ran, it's kind of had extra bits in it. So in addition to all the aspects that were in the first version, you'll see that we've added a few sections to it. This was, you know, because people told us what they wanted. So very much around keeping warm. Money matters, and about fraud or scams, because people were really concerned about getting access to cash, you know, while they were at home, or maybe neighbours were doing shopping for them. So it was really important that we had some information about this. Pension credits. There are millions and millions of pounds underclaimed in pension credits every year. And as part of this campaign and by sending out this booklet, we've increased pension credit access by up to £200,000 just in the last 3 months, which is a huge success for us in terms of older people starting to help them live better for longer, and certainly live with the right financial means that they will need to survive and live well. We also included some information about accessing health and care appointments, because we'd heard that people just didn't contact their GPs, and also around winter flu jabs as well. Next slide, please. The next version also included some additional accompanying resources, which includes a talking tips thing. So it's all about, we spoke to a group of older people, and, you know, the kind of tips that maybe you might want to ask your neighbour, you know, how am I doing today? What have I had for my tea? So this was really important when you're thinking about people that have been isolating. And so there was also a little short film that went with the talking tips. So the talking tips is a little 2-pager that was given out to healthcare professionals, but also to lots of voluntary community organisations and just wider communities as well. The video is a really great little video about asking me how I'm coping, if I'm doing okay. We translated it into Bangla, Urdu. There's an easy read version, which also is great for, you know, not only people with learning disabilities, but also anybody who's got different cognitive diversity or different reading levels. So maybe in Manchester, we have such a broad and diverse community, those that maybe English wasn't their first language. We found that was another way of actually getting the information out. We've done an audio version and a British Sign Language version. So there we have it. the Keeping Well campaign. It's been an amazing year, and I'm enormously proud of the piece of work. I would now just like to play a short video, which actually gives you an overview, not from my perspective, but from the Greater Manchester Older People's Network, of the campaign itself, to demonstrate why for us having the voice of older people at the heart of everything we do is absolutely critical. So Paul, if you could share your screen and just activate the two things. It's just a short video and hopefully it'll give you an overview of what I've just talked about. I'm going to silence myself while it's on.
Okay, I'm just pressing play. Jane, hear it.
At the end of March, just before national lockdown, we soon identified that there was a need for printed materials for older people. There was very much a digital first communication strategy being used by the government, and we knew that there was a lot of older people who either weren't online or didn't access information online around things like health and well-being.
When we were looking at the content for the booklet, it's really important to us as a university that the work we've done within the Healthy Ageing Research Group is all evidence-based. And so we were thinking, how can we best get that message out to people?
Older people are going to be the recipient of this booklet. If we are involved, we have got shared experiences, all older people, and also we can help to promote it.
A draft booklet came through asking if we could look through it and whether or not we had any suggestions or anything that would add to it.
This book is good because it doesn't negate you. This book is like a silent friend.
We got contacted from the local authority who said, could we contact members and how many members could we contact? So we had a database of around just short of 1,000 people that we work with. So we could hit a large number of people quite quickly.
We made sure that we went to all the hubs, all the community centers, all the neighborhood centers, and they were distributed.
In Rochdale, we've got them into the vaccination centre. So not only do the older people get a jab, which is fantastic, they also get the Keeping Well in Winter booklet.
Older people within our city region are valuable members of our research. They're valuable contributors. They are valuable, not vulnerable members of society. And so for us, their engagement, their involvement, their inclusion in all of our research is absolutely critical.
The great thing about this is it was done by people who are just like me, who are just in my situation, who are just experiencing the same things as me.
I think the idea of just normal people basically trying to get a message across, people can relate to that. It's good fun doing it, and hopefully we hit the target at the end of the day.
Because I'd been so involved, I sort of had a bit of ownership, I think, of it.
I particularly saw myself as a partner in this, not as a you and them. I felt very much involved, and that our contribution was taken on board.
And it's that of being involved in a team to produce a net result and getting the book to people and it making a significant difference, which I believe it did. You know, being involved in that team part and in that process, that was the best part.
Thank you, Paul. So just a bit of a snapshot, really. And I think, you know, ultimately now we know, as we're moving into summer and actually we're coming out of COVID, we're starting to go out of lockdown. We know that it's being used by reablement teams, you know, to actually give somebody, because the exercises in there are really, really thorough, especially the strength and balance ones. And so kind of starring what people should be doing. There's clearly demonstrated. So actually people can go home, and they're using the booklets in lots of different ways. And essentially this as a campaign is really a demonstration of how listening and learning from an ecosystem through trusted relationships, but also a shared purpose, that we can together deliver something truly collaborative. You know, all of this in spite of physical distancing and lockdown measures, it really was about passion, a shared passion to deliver something different. Okay, so that's the campaign. I have got a couple more slides just about some of the work that we're doing. I'm happy to just to talk that through if I've got time. I'm not sure how long I've been speaking for now. I don't mind. We can just go straight to questions if you want.
Is a couple of minutes okay, Jane?
Okay, it's just to touch on a couple of other areas of work, just so people are kind of can see what we're doing. So it was just, the next slide is, I think it's slide 11. So the work of the Healthy Aging Research Group, we do a lot of stuff around technology and innovation for active and healthy aging. So very much in the field of technologies and falls prevention and physical activity promotion, but all with older adults. So we have that's our area. So I think this is, just go back one slide.
Sorry.
Thanks, Paul. So this is an example of something. So these two examples from a colleague of mine, Dr. Emma Stanmore, who's done some really amazing work in this area. And this is called exergaming. So exergaming is when you apply gamification theory, so design and gaming, to develop games that are physical exercises that include evidence-based strength and balance. So it's incorporated in the video game. And that's some of the data around specific pieces of work, a trial that Emma conducted in Greater Manchester and also in Nottingham. And what's really lovely about the exergames is, you know, the course, part of the programme that people go into is you understand, you have to find out what somebody loved doing, and what you can do is give them an immersive experience in a game. So they're basically just playing a game, but whilst they're moving, the movements that they're doing are evidence-based strength and balance exercises. So this trial was run in a sheltered facility, and what we actually found that, you know, there's quite large numbers. There was two different arms of the trial, but improvement in exergame group was that balance, fear of falling and pain had reduced significantly, and there was fewer falls as well. It was really cost effective, and adherence at 12 weeks was 87% because people really, really loved it. We also, you know, there was a lady that had been diagnosed with depression and had lost her husband recently, and had really had some early cognitive changes as well. And she was having a real struggle. She started doing this, and at first she could only do a couple of movements with the support of chairs, one on each side, when practicing some shoulder exercises. Needed lots of hands-on support. By the end of the 12 weeks, she was doing the exercise without any chair, any support or anything. She's completely transformed. Another lady that engaged in the trial kind of got herself a car again and got back out there and was out driving, redid a test so that she, you know, felt confident again in terms of driving, but really changed some of her levels of confidence and her aspirations about what she could and couldn't do. You go to the next slide. There's another piece of work which is called the Keep On Keep Up app. We actually made this, Emma, we made this free to everybody during COVID. This is an online application. It's actually in tablet form, currently available on iPad, but is also next month, it's in glitch phase at the moment, and will be available on Android. This is very much assists older adults to independently engage with evidence-based strength and balance exercises. It's got games about maintaining, building strength, increasing bone health, home safety tips, staying hydrated, nutrition. It's been developed with in-depth testing with over 100 adults aged over 65 in sheltered housing facility. It doesn't need any clinical reassessment. It's got some general novel self-assessment descriptors when you first log in. very much around user-centered design, been tested, it's accessible for people with sensory impairments and also mild cognitive changes. It's also based on behaviour change theory. This has been an award-winning app. It's got a huge score on Orca, and Orca is the kind of test pilot to make sure your app meets a certain criteria for use across the NHS. So, we're really excited. That's a great piece of work. We just go to the next slide. I'm just going to touch on the policy research unit. So during COVID, 20% of our function is responsive work, so that we can get a call and we've got 24 hours to respond, or we might have 3 months or 6 months or 12 months. It depends, but it's called rapid response work. We've done about 70% of our function in the last 12 months has all been rapid response into the department. Pre-COVID, we did a piece on strength and balance exercise, falls prevention and musculoskeletal health, of course, quoting and referring to a lot of the work that Charlie did in the CMO guidelines. So we did that for the Chris Whitty CMO. During COVID, we've done some stuff around technologies for strength and balance. This is a review of reviews. We've also mapped the apps. And we've done some work around digital inclusion for older populations and how that's how that's hindered or increased access to health services. We've done a piece around remotely delivered interventions to reduce social isolation and loneliness, because obviously this move to digital is the only answer, but actually does it work? And currently we have got a piece which started in November, which again links very much to what Charlie was saying at the beginning in terms of life course interventions. And we've done a very quick overview of the existing evidence on the patterns and trends of the UK population in terms of levels of strength. Also identify whether there's actually key ages and any subpopulations of which an intervention should be fruitfully targeted. And we've also identified a few methods of assessment as well. So that report is due out very, very, very soon, and it will be live. All these things are on our website. You can access them. We'll certainly share them. That's it. I'll stop. I think the next one is just my sign off and some contacts.
Wonderful. Jane, thanks so much for sharing such valuable resources and talking us through the story of that creation, that co-creation of that particular wonderful resource. Supporting older people and design of older people. It's a fantastic example of co-production too. Right, so let's move. In the last half an hour, we wanted to open up the floor for hearing from people attending here today to hear some questions for our speakers. So I'm going to hand over to Gary. And while we do this, I know I'm going to stand up and move around a little bit because we've been sitting down for an hour. So if people also want to stand up and move around and have a quick walk around the house as well, please feel free to do that as we move into the questions. Hopefully our speakers won't go too far. We still hear the questions.
Okay, yeah, so I've been taking a note of the questions as we've been going along. So I'll start with questions for Charlie. Now, some of the questions, because they're being presented now, I'm not exactly sure what the context was when the question was originally posed. So the first question is from Andrea, and it's how many participants were in your trials or projects?
Thanks, Gary. This probably refers to the figure which shows the different types of physical activities and their relevant contributions to different sports, to muscle strength, bone and balance health. The answer to that is whenever you do science, you end up with willing volunteers. Unfortunately, sometimes those willing volunteers aren't necessarily typical of the people you most like to get there to test your intervention on. So the size of these studies generally tends to be quite small, and how representative, that means how typical they are of the whole population, also tends not to be that representative, because we tend to get generally well people who like to take part in physical activity trials. That being said, all the studies that we did have, we put through the mill. And in fact, my colleague Dr. Miranda Armstrong's on the call at the moment, and she did quite a lot of this work as well. We looked to make sure that the evidence was strong enough to be able to say with certainty, we know that these things work. And the rankings are kind of relative in terms of the strength of the evidence and the consistency of the evidence. And there was a question about Tai Chi, and I might be jumping ahead there, Gary, but we were delighted with the Tai Chi evidence base. Absolutely no problem with it improving all aspects of strength, balance, and bone health. But of course, compared to an activity where you have to move much more and perhaps move more quickly, you just got relatively less benefit than those. However, if you're not doing much, Tai Chi is a brilliant place to start. Thoroughly recommend it.
Brilliant, thank you. So hopefully that answers your question, Andrea. It's always good to ask about sort of numbers and participants in trials. Excellent question. There's another question here from Rebecca. Now, again, I think this is more of it's kind of taken out of context from the talk, but it says, do you think this will change in the next 10 years as retirement age increases? Culture is changing constantly. So what might the impact say in 10 years time?
So I'll go quickly, but I'm sure there's others who've got an opinion on this. Yes, I think obviously the longer people work, the less time they have to do things they like doing, which means when we notice when people stop working and retire, they fall into two groups who take up new activities and groups that don't. And the ones who don't tended not to do those activities before they retired as well. So keeping working for longer might just mean that quite a considerable group of the population, and from a study we published a few years ago, we know these are lower SES groups with more occupational jobs and more part-time jobs put together are less likely to take up what we would see as recreational leisure type activities.
Brilliant. I mean, Jane, did you want to sort of chip in there as well? Any thoughts on that?
I think Charlie's covered it. I mean, I think the only other thing is people that do manual work are more likely to become more sedentary when they retire. So there's an inequality level in there as well.
Okay. So again, thanks, Rebecca, for that question. It's a really interesting question because, like you say, retirement and when retirement might be, and aging population, it's constant challenge really. So we've already covered the Tai Chi question, so that's good. So thanks for that, Charlie. I think this is another question again for Charlie specifically. It was about Rebecca. We'll get to you now, don't worry. It's a whole order effect.
It's just the order, Jane, that's all.
So the question is, from Rebecca, interesting in your pregnancy diagnosis, as society is changing, many women are waiting until later in life to start a family now, so which may have an impact. Again, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's certainly the as the average age of first pregnancy is going up. When we did the pregnancy work, I was surprised to learn that half of pregnancies are unplanned. So there's still half of those maybe at the time you least expect it. But what we see is with pregnancy is activity levels generally falling, and there is a bit of reluctance amongst health professionals to encourage people to be active. Women to be active during pregnancy, and particularly in relation to strength training. And the advice that we have with the physical activity in relation to pregnancy is don't start anything new, but gradually taper off what you've currently been doing as your pregnancy develops, and start gradually again after your pregnancy as well.
Fantastic. So before we, there's just one other comment, I think, which is before we move on to Jane, and then we got questions for both of you as well. So there's a question here, comment, yeah, to Paul. Paul's going to field all the questions from now on. So there's a comment here from Maggie, who's is kind of sort of a comment around about lack of access, say, to personal trainers and group exercise, and because of money. And it's in the last 12 months, because of lockdown and things like that, people don't really have that motivation to kind of engage with stuff if it's just them and there's no external person. But I know there's quite a few questions about that a little bit later, so we'll keep hold of that, keep that comment in mind, and come back to some of those issues in a minute. But Jane, if we can just, again, another sort of basic statement, really, which is from Judith Brown saying co-production works, exclamation mark. And I think we have to kind of say yes. And it was, so there's a question here. The co-design aspect of this project looks so important and valuable. What was your process of recruiting your co-editing team? And did they all represent the paper first opinion of the rest of your research? So that's a question from Megan.
So thanks, Megan. We were really limited on so we have an established relationship and a trusted relationship with the Greater Manchester Older People's Network. They've got over 4,000 members across Greater Manchester of older people, but also stakeholder groups and local VCS, voluntary community sector organisations. So we put a call out to that. And actually, when we were in that very early stage of lockdown, we just had to go with volunteers. And as Charlie said, there is limitations with people that volunteer. It's the usual suspects, people that always kind of get involved in these things. But for us, we were at a point of we need to do something, we need to act fast. It was about being agile, pivoting, and just delivering as quickly as we could, getting evidence out to people so that they had some information that made sense to them. So that was our recruitment. And then we just spent a lot of the time on the phone, and then we sent things to people via the post for them to check and send back, or via digital if they were online. That's how we did the first one. That's why actually the evaluation was so important, because that went out to a different group of people. So that was almost a second way of making sure, what have we included? Does it look right? What have we missed? And actually all the things that we learned about what we had missed were really important, which is why we then put them in the second set. But it was really about tapping in to the relationships that we had, the ecosystem that we have established, to enable us to work really, really quickly and at pace. We were lucky because a couple of our Older People Network members were ex-journalists, which was great. So they really ripped us to shreds when they looked at what we'd written. But yeah, so that was but it was great.
Brilliant. And Jessica, there's a couple of comments or questions from people around the distribution of the booklets. So Liz from Dudley Council, how did you identify who you sent the booklets to? And Jane from Greater Manchester, Jane says Greater Manchester has 10 boroughs. Where were the brochures distributed?
Okay, so the first time, as I said, we kind of were beg, stealing and borrowed. You know, I did this at, at my weekends and at night, when after work during those early days when we were putting it all together. Distribution, we had no money at the time. We literally didn't have anything. So we went to all the local authorities, we offered it to them, and it was the local authorities that had to come up with the funding to print their own copies and distribute them. So not all local authorities took up the opportunity. Some did. I think in the first round, that's 66,000, it was 7 out of the 10. A couple of them had produced their own little booklets that they'd sent out anyway already, or as part, they'd learned from what we'd done, but wanted to do a hyper-localised version. So they went through lots of different means and ways, but local authorities, for example, I know Manchester City Council, they looked at everybody that they'd written out to on that over 70s list. There was 15,000 people, I think, or 17,000 people that they identified that were both over 70 and seen as, shielding. They just did a direct mail shot to all of them with the booklet, and that's how they distributed them. Others, they went in food parcels, they went through community hubs, went through VCSE infrastructure, through mutual aid groups and stuff like that. Every different local authority did a different way, and they had their own way of identifying who they were targeting. We did also work with sheltered housing providers as well, because they were obviously quite an important pathway into distribution. I hope that answers your question. The second, okay. So the second time, when we did the second booklet, we were very lucky because we had all the evidence from the first one, evaluation and everything, World Health Organization, that we got enough funding from the Central Combined Authority Health and Social Care Partnership, and managed to get it from a number of different partners. So we produced 120,000 copies in the second print run. And then they were distributed. Again, local authorities had their own ways to do it, and that was everything from now going into vaccination centres, so people get handed a booklet as well, but also in re-ablement, because whilst we produce things at GMCA level, you can't then diagnose how people want to distribute it amongst their local community infrastructure, because they're all very different across the 10 boroughs.
Okay, that's great. I think that's a good comprehensive answer. So thanks, Jan. So there's a comment from Judith Bristol Aging Better saying it's essential that we continue to provide non-digital information to older people. So that's that's a really positive thing. Okay, question about the app from Clement. Is the app available in several languages?
Sadly, not yet, but that's my next mission. So we definitely want to translate it. And so when it gets launched at the moment, it is just in English, but our plan is, and also the food in it, but I think we want to be working with a local group, and it's a piece of work that we're looking to develop a proposal on, and then we can both get it, because it's not just with the app, it's not just translating it. There's things like we will want to really make sure they're culturally sensitive. So for example, there's a game that you play where you select different food from the fridge, and we think it's important to make sure that food is culturally relative to somebody who's actually, you know, what would you normally eat if you're Afro-Caribbean or if you're from Pakistan, you know, so certain parts of India. So it's important that we make sure that's representative, but it would be a great piece of work, and we are very, very keen to do it. So yeah, we'd like to, but just not yet.
I mean, again, that's when the co-production really comes into its own, doesn't it? So with sort of developing, sort of translating in different languages and things like that. Okay, so now we come to the section which I apologise if I've missed any questions out, because I know there's been some ongoing discussions among yourself on the chat window, so I've tried to take out the questions, hopefully. So these are questions that I think are aimed at both of you now. So again, from Judith Bristol Aging Better, to both, how do you plan to get your message across to the older people who are not online, do not possess a smartphone, and do not have any method of communication other than a non-smartphone?
So we did it through printed materials, because that was exactly the problem we were trying to get over. That's what we were hearing. We were aware of the statistics of digital exclusion across Greater Manchester. And also, you know, people just, even those that were connected, 83% of still said, but I prefer printed material, you know, and I think some of us do. For some things, we actually like to read something, go back to it, have it in a physical presence rather than something that's kind of digital. And I think we are still in that transition, and I'm not sure at what point that will change. I don't think it will be in my lifetime, because I still enjoy printed materials.
Okay, Charlie, did you have anything to sort of comment on that, or?
No, I'm with Jane. I like books over non-printed stuff.
Yeah, I think it'd be a long time before everything be just electronic format, hopefully. Okay, it's a question from Maggie. COVID has been wonderful for funding research projects. I'm interested to know whether there will be any money available to implement all the recommendations that have been proposed. So who?
Oh, I'll go first. And Paul, you can join in on this one. I'm not sure COVID's been great for us. I'm not sure COVID's been that great for funding research projects. I think quite rightly, resources have been spent on dealing with the pandemic in a direct manner on the vaccination. Certainly in our field, we don't see a rush to invest in what works and programs. And the good thing is Jane's brilliant research centre's got some really good solutions, but scaling those solutions up, making them available in practice, and seeing if they work and genuinely survive the realities of real life is a real challenge. I think there will be from the government, and the rumours I'm hearing, monies available for programs encouraging the nation to become more active, but I'm yet to see the detail of that. I hear a lot of rhetoric. Jane, I'm sure you can add.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good point. I mean, I think, like Charlie, I think resources been spent in certain areas. I'm not sure a lot of that has been around research. I mean, we were kind of, as I said, it was really just an idea, and we did it, with a tiny budget. And it's actually the University of Manchester that it was, one of our internal budgets. It wasn't external. But I think, yeah, actually, from what we've seen, is there's been a decline in research funding and in research applications, especially from women, because of the overwhelming impact of COVID in terms of the working life and kind of having children at home and homeschooling and just coping with the issues that we've all had to deal with as families, whilst also all in full-time work over the past 12 months. But there's a number of implementation projects that are funded by the Health Research. So the Applied Research Collaboration, which are these huge big, they're called the ARCs, but they are all about implementation. And I'm quite sure that in the Southeast or Southwest, you've got your own version of an ARC. We've got a Greater Manchester ARC. And so the evaluation that we did as part of this was actually funded by some of the healthy aging team that sit within our group through the ARC. But, it's difficult, isn't it? We know that there's just been a huge cut to international funding, which actually really prevents us from contributing to some of the big global sustainable development goals about reducing poverty, increasing and improving the lives of children, getting access to education, women's health. These are big issues that are international, and it's just been completely cut, and that's just going to devastate some people's lives. So from that perspective, but I appreciate we have real inequalities in the UK, and they do need to be addressed. And implementation is a difficult issue. Paul.
There's actually a sort of follow-up question actually from Andrea, which you're talking about inequalities. So the question is, my concern over the next 10 years is that we will see a greater increase in health inequality, and parts of the population will still experience a more negative experience of aging. How can we develop holistic systems and programs that can address this? It's a nice simple question for you.
I mean, I would just say that is a great question, and it's the wicked problem that I try and deal with on a daily basis. Even the ecosystem that we're trying to look at across the Greater Manchester footprint in itself, we know that there's inequity of access to services. We know that even it's postcode, depending on which local authority you live in, is whether you've got access to really great community-based strength and balance programs that are delivered by exercise professionals or physios that have the right qualifications and the level of knowledge that you need to make sure that that's really going to prevent you from falling and increase your independence. So, we know that then you can live across the road and not have access to that at all. So it really is a wicked problem. But I also believe that every day that as system leaders and system contributors, we can't step up and have those difficult conversations and actually start to change behaviour, change the way our systems work, then every day then somebody continues to either lose their life or is impacted as a result of the inequalities that they've had over their lifetime. And so I completely agree with you that we have a responsibility to step up and challenge and request change that needs to happen.
Can I add there on the research funding? There is a call out at the moment from the ESRC, Economic Social Research Council, on inclusive research and inclusive ageing, which is addressing some inequalities experienced by different groups of older people, particularly people belonging to minority groups and disabled older adults. So there is some waves of research funding coming through, and that same council is planning a big call on dementia and ageing also. They haven't said when, but in the coming 12 months, hopefully. But I just wanted to say, putting funding aside, I think Jane's resource and Charlie's work around systematic reviews are all really good examples of not necessarily producing more research, but using existing research to produce some really valuable resources. And perhaps we need to do more of that than creating more research evidence, if that makes sense. If the evidence is, we've already got a lot of really valuable evidence.
Well, I think because the next question I had down was from Ben, but I know Charlie's already been on the chat function sending out links to that. So I think that was the last main question. And just the last thing on the chat window is Rebecca saying, why can't all districts and areas work together? Which is, wouldn't that be nice? So yes, I think that's all of the questions that I've captured. So thanks for all of that. So Paul.
Sure, thanks, Gary. I'll swap roles with you next time.
Thanks.
Look, another really big thank you to our experts and keynote speakers today, Jane McDermott and Charlie Foster. Thanks so much for sharing all these different resources and papers, as well as just talking us through some of the great work that you've been involved in over the last 12 months and some of the really important messages coming out of that. So thank you, and lots of comments of appreciation coming through on the chat box as well. So as a forum, we'll be back later on in the year, probably in the summer, for our next forum. We try to have 3 to 4 of these events each year. Like last year, we'll probably continue online for this year while we wait and see what happens as we all start to tentatively move out of lockdown. But we have everybody's contact details from the registration today, and we add people to our mailing list unless you tell us otherwise. So we'll be back in touch soon about our next event and next topic. And feel free to email us. I don't know if Claire's on the call, able to maybe put a email contact in the chat box. Feel free to email us with any particular topics that you think we should address, so you think are really important for us to address, particularly for older people. And we'll also send out a short feedback questionnaire, which will give you another chance to tell us what topics you think we should focus on. So from all of us in the Research Forum, thanks very much. Great to see so many people here. Have a wonderful day.